Hi everyone, and welcome to the Learning DITA Live series webinar. I'm Elizabeth Patterson, and I will be moderating this presentation today. My colleague Bill Swallow will be presenting Simplifying Your Rebranding Efforts with DITA. The Learning DITA Live series is brought to you by Scriptorium, the content strategy experts. Since 1997, Scriptorium has helped companies manage, structure, organize, and distribute content in an efficient way. If you are trying to figure out how the DITA model can best support your content or you're setting up a DITA system, please contact us. We would love to work with you. LearningDITA.com and the Learning DITA Live series would not be possible without the help from our sponsors. So thank you. Attendees are muted during the webcast. Even so, we still want your input during the session, so please type your questions and comments at any time in the questions module, and our speaker will answer those questions at the end of the session. If you would, please go ahead now and locate the questions module in the GoToWebinar interface. At the beginning of the question and answer phase, look for a link to a session evaluation survey in the questions module. We appreciate your feedback on the session. And now, Bill, if you are ready, I'm going to go ahead and pass this to you.
Sounds good.
Great.
Okay, how's that look?
That looks good. You're ready to go.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone, and thanks for attending Simplifying Your Rebranding Efforts with DITA. As Elizabeth mentioned, I'm Bill Swallow. I'm the Director of Operations at Scriptorium, and I've been implementing creative content solutions for a bit over 20 years. We won't say exactly how many years that is, but to give you an idea, I began doing this with single sourcing between RTF-based documentation and WinHelp files. So if that gives you any indication, it's been a little while. My focus is on managing the content lifecycle better, or making it easier to manage that. And one aspect of that is managing the branding. So we talk about rebranding. It can be exciting and it can be dreadful at the same time. On the plus side, all of your content gets a fresh new look, but on the downside, nearly all of your content needs to change. So why would your company decide to rebrand? And what does it mean for your content? Well, there are several key reasons that a company would want to rebrand. They might be acquired, or you might be acquiring another company. In that case, you need all new logos, new colors, taglines, copyrights, all that fun stuff needs to change. Your company might also be just looking for a makeover. So, you have a tired old logo, you need to update it or modernize it to appeal to more modern tastes. In that case, all of your, all the same stuff would need to change: the logos, colors, perhaps the taglines and such. Copyrights and other legalese, maybe not so much. You also might be spinning off a new product, or you might be creating a new service division. Perhaps all of your products are getting individual identities, or a division of the company is being spun off as a subsidiary. That's going to need some specific brand attention as well, and you might need to carry your content over into that new look and feel. OEM cases or business partnerships. So maybe your brand isn't changing, but you need to worry about, where your content is going. So if you have a partner that's going to be repurposing a lot of it and they need to rebrand, you need to be mindful about how they need to worry about rebranding, or you might end up needing to rebrand for them. Likewise, you might be ingesting content from a partner, and that content itself would need to be rebranded. And then, of course, you have pure whimsy, because, why not change the look and feel? Sometimes change is just in the wind. So rebranding, it's a one-time effort, right? Well, you might never rebrand, but that's highly unlikely. If you rebrand only once, I'd say you're very fortunate. Some companies change their branding or other aspects quite often. Years ago, I worked for a software company, and they began, at least when I was there, they began with a color logo and then decided at some point that they were going to go monochrome. And so we had to change everything to monochrome. And then they decided, you know what, we're going to completely change our look and feel. We don't like the monochrome, but we're not ready to roll out the new brand. So we're going to have this interim brand that we need to rebrand to. And we had that for about 18 months. And then they rolled out the new brand, which actually included 6 different colors and logos for the different types of products we offered. So we had we had many different products, but they all fit into 6 different product silos. So each of those silos got a special color. So then our content had to be rebranded 6 times across the board in different ways. And then we were acquired, and we had to rebrand at that point to have the new parent company name. And then there was a division name change. And so then we had to change our branding to cover that new division name. And then we had another division name change. So we had to do it all again. So as you can guess, we kind of got a little bit better at it the more often we did this, but all of those changes took place within the scope of 6 years, if you can believe it or not. And it drove me and all of the writers I worked with absolutely batty. So what can change? So it's not just the visual design. We'll take a look at this. So you have your logos. Those may change. Your colors certainly might change. So all of the layouts that you have will also change. So if you have colored hyperlinking and so forth that use the company colors, all those will need to change. All of your background colors, border colors, cover colors, headings, all that fun stuff. Your fonts, of course, those may change. Any imagery you use for the covers, for backgrounds, etc., all of those may need to change. The specific delivery formats that you're targeting may need to change. So perhaps your company's decided to go completely paperless and shun even the likes of PDF in favor of mobile and web. You may need to not necessarily rebrand, but you may need to move a lot of stuff around in order to get the branding to fit within those new layouts. Company names may change quite a bit, especially in the case of acquisitions. Product names can always change. Feature names within certain products and services. So you may change a particular type of service that you offer to call it something else, and suddenly you have to update it everywhere. Copyright information, especially if you're changing ownership, is going to change. Any legal disclaimers are certainly going to change at that point. Contact information, especially if your headquarters moves, or if it becomes or if it changes to a new parent company, for example, or in the case of spinning off a division, you may want to change the contact information for that specific division now. All of these things are going to need to change. Now, in how many different places are you going to need to manage this stuff? Well, let's first take a look at the traditional unstructured approach to writing content. And in those cases, you may have lots of different files in play. Do you work in just one tool? Maybe you just work in Word, or maybe you just work in FrameMaker, or maybe you work in both, or you work in any combination of different ones. And perhaps you also single source. You maybe use RoboHelp or Flare. All of these things contain lots of branding information that needs to be updated separately. Do you have a template for each format that you're using? Do your authors use these templates intelligently? Are they consistently using them? In my experience, it's not always the case. As much as I would like to say it was the case in teams I even managed, it was not the case. You always find formatting overrides and lots of other things. Lots of also rogue styles creeping in. So someone might be using the template, but they add an additional style because they liked it. And now all of a sudden you have this new style that appears in some files, but not in others. Lots of fun stuff like that can happen. And do you copy paste? A lot of times these unstructured tools, they don't allow for smart reuse. In some cases they do. So FrameMaker, of course, has text insets and stuff that you can use, and you can certainly swap files in and out of a book file. But a lot of times the nitty-gritty content, especially boilerplate content like copyright information, legalese, all that stuff, it usually gets copied and pasted, even from one template to another. And when you do copy and paste them, is it done exactly, or are they modified once they're pasted in? And can you search and replace for this stuff easily? So you may need to make changes to each file individually, but in the case of more strict authoring environments like FrameMaker, you can at least do a bulk update of the templates book by book, provided that the templates were adhered to in the first place. But then you have overrides, formatting overrides. So a lot of times you'll see, in Word, I can't tell you how many documents I've seen that have the style normal star or normal asterisk, and that just drives me nuts because no one took the time to actually create a style for anything. They just decide, oh, I'm just going to format it by hand. In this case, if you're applying a template and you're removing overrides in a single sweeping motion, then all of your custom formatting could be lost, or the content itself might refuse to update easily, in which case you're then just carrying overrides into your template. And then you have all of these rogue content styles that your writers may have created using templates to contend with, because your core template may not account for them. So suddenly, if you change your fonts, especially from something like a serif font to a non-serif font, you might have a rogue style that still uses the wrong one, in which case it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And then, of course, once you do finally wrangle all this stuff and get it aligned with a new template and a new look and feel, you have to then republish everything. So an unstructured approach, it requires a very manual process to rebrand things. You spend a lot of time doing this for no real change beyond the look and feel. In your best case scenario, you're going to spend, maybe a few minutes per file updating things, and then maybe a couple hours to publish it, to get all of the files done and then publish it. The more likely scenario is that you're going to probably spend close to hours per source file making all these changes, and then perhaps up to days before you can then republish even a single publication with the new branding. And let's just say that, that's just time not well spent. You could certainly find a million things that you'd rather be doing than updating font information in all of your files. Or maybe you like to do that, but I think most people would agree it's a bit of a time-consuming mess. So let's talk a little bit about the DITA approach to branding. What does that look like? DITA by its nature is highly structured. It's XML. You can't deviate from that structure without causing errors in your files. And as you're authoring, either as you try saving the file and using it, or in some cases, your authoring tool may yell at you as you try to do something that it doesn't, that the structure doesn't allow, you'll be notified, and you'll have to correctly apply the correct style, the correct tags, to your content before you can save it. And because DITA is XML, it doesn't contain any formatting information. It's just text, so you don't have overrides creeping in. And content is semantically tagged rather than tagged with formatting indicators. So that opens up a world of possibility for formatting. All of that stuff you don't have to worry about in the files. It's handled at the time you're publishing. So all of your fonts, your font sizes, your colors, your layouts, all that stuff, you don't need to worry about it when you're authoring content in DITA. That's handled specifically by your publishing scenarios. Essentially, you're letting technology do all that heavy lifting for you. And there are 5 key areas that you need to look at and make use of in DITA if you really want to automate your branding as much as possible. We'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into this. So first we'll talk about style sheets. And here's where you get your biggest bang for your buck. Style sheets are also called transformations or transforms. These are the workhorses of your publishing process that takes your DITA content and formats it for publication. So when you go to publish your vanilla text DITA content, you pick an output, and these style sheets essentially take that content, pours the content into them and publishes it. So anything that is tagged a certain way in DITA is going to be rendered based on the rules within those style sheets. They count entirely for your look and feel. So all of the layout information, all of the colors, the fonts, all that stuff, your style sheets take care of. And that's really about, I would say, 90% of what you need to worry about when it comes to rebranding. All of those things could be a nightmare to update in an unstructured environment. The style sheets just make it easier. So you make any branding changes that you need only to your style sheets, which are just a single set for each output type, really. And then you can just publish all of your content again, straight through it, and all of the content will pick up all the new look and feel. It's quite automated. Another area that you wouldn't think of is with metadata. And specifically 4 key areas of metadata, or 4 key types of metadata that allow you to manage some of the branding elements. So the first one is at the map level. You have a lot of publication-based information. You have information about the author, the publisher, the copyright, any product information. If your content belongs to a particular type of series or a particular group of products, you can identify that there. And with that metadata in place at the map level, when you publish, the style sheet will look at that and say, oh, this is this specific type of product. It's going to get the blue color, look and feel. I'm thinking back to the cases where I was working at that crazy software company. And in another case, if it's a different series, it gets the red color. And perhaps you can swap fonts in and out. You can even control logos based on information about either the publisher or the author or a certain target identified in that map level metadata. The same thing goes with topic level, especially if you're publishing one-offs like little fact sheets and such, and you don't necessarily want to use a map. All of this is available there as well. But another element, and it's not quite metadata, but another area where at the topic level you can control your branding is by using different topic types. So if you have a very specific type of content that needs to go out with a certain look and feel, you can use a very specific topic type to author that content. And then when you publish, your style sheet will say, oh, you're this type of content, so you're a quick reference guide, or you are a fact sheet. You're going to get published this way with this look and feel. And then another one might come through as a standard concept or a task or some other type of content and say, okay, you're going to use the generic look and feel that we have for the company. With profiling metadata, you can tailor content for specific audiences and for specific outputs. So if you're doing that OEM type content sharing, you can use profiling information to swap stuff in and out. So if you have company-specific disclaimers and so forth that you want to use, or company-specific information that goes along with your content that you want to obscure when you send it out to an OEM partner, you can then use the profiling metadata to turn that off and publish for their needs. And certainly you can do that with different products. If you have a generic product and a deluxe product, you can turn things on and off, author in one topic file. Say it's a feature list. You can have all the features for the generic and the deluxe, and then you can include or omit the deluxe stuff depending on whether you're publishing for the generic or the deluxe version. And then finally, with subject schemes, this allows you to really rein in exactly what writers can do with the metadata. and allow them, really say, okay, you're only going to be allowed these certain values to use in these cases. What this does is it prevents lots of unwanted or unaccounted for values, so that your style sheets will know that you are expecting 5 different types of values for one piece of metadata, and you can account for all 5 of them in the style sheets when you publish. If you weren't using a subject scheme and you weren't constraining those values, if someone added a 6th value, or if they typoed a value, so then suddenly the style sheet doesn't know what to do with it, so it's just going to say, oh, I'll ignore it and I'll just pass it through as is, which may give you some very wrong results. So in that case, by constraining it, you're removing the override situation that you would have with styles in an unstructured environment. So let's talk about warehouse topics for a bit. And do you have content that needs to be used everywhere? So stuff that is, generally used, multiple times throughout your content. Warehouse topics are a great place to manage all of this stuff. So why duplicate it by copy and pasting it when you can just reuse it everywhere? With warehouse topics, you get to centralize all of your common stock content. So, a great example of this are notes, cautions, and warnings. All of those labels, a lot of them generally are going to be pretty generic. So, things like, if you're working in machinery, being able to say, hey, don't stick your hand in there or you're going to lose it. You only have to write that once, and then you can use that, write it once in the warehouse topic and then reuse it throughout all of your content without having to rewrite it every time or copy paste it. And when you use these warehouse topics, you want to be able to organize them. And how you organize them really doesn't matter, as long as you have agreement across your team about this is where this reusable content is going to live. You can organize it by brand, you can organize it by product, you can organize it by audience, you can organize it by content type. It really doesn't matter, as long as you know how it's going to be organized. And in that way, everyone has an idea of one place to go for all of this content that is going to be used and reused over and over and over again. And something we'll get into in just a bit, using these warehouse topics can contribute to smart contextual reuse of the content itself. So we'll get into this a little bit with keys and keyrefs. So if you need to manage things like name changes or image swapping, stuff like that, keys and keyrefs are going to be a lifesaver. So with keys and keyrefs, think of them kind of as variables in something like Word or FrameMaker. They work in a very similar way, but they use generic pointers to indicate that something is going to go into this space, whether it be a company name or a product name or something like that, but we're not going to define it here. Instead, we're going to define it at the map level. And when that map is published, that value is going to get permeated through all of your content. And this is really great if you do have cases where you are sharing content across many different looks and feels and many different types of publications, and the product name might change, but the content itself will remain the same. So you want to make sure that you can write this topic once, and every time you reference a product name, you can just pull in the one that's sitting in the map file. You can change all of the values either in the map file and republish it again and again and again, or what many people choose to do is make a copy of the map file, especially if it's using all of the same content or a majority of the same content, change whatever topics you need to exclude and include, and then just change the key definitions at that point. And then you have a brand new publication that is ready to go, and all of the company information, all the company names, all the product names and such will update based on what's in the map. Conrefs and conkeyrefs get a little more interesting. So do you remember those warehouse topics we were talking about? You can reuse that stored content via conref and conkeyref throughout all of your content. So a conref is like a straight line, grab this and put it here. So every time you use a conref, you're basically saying, go to this file, grab this thing and put it here in my document. It's great when you have something, again, like the machinery manual example that says don't stick your hand in here or you're going to lose it. So that way, if you have it appearing once on every page or once before every bit of instruction on how to maintain this machine, in that case, you would just say, okay, I'm going to use a conref and I'm going to look at my warehouse topic that has this one warning and I'm going to pull that right in and just plop it there. Conkeyref, very similar concept, except now you're using keys to manage where to look, which warehouse topic to look in. So if you have several different products that are kind of similar, but they need to have a little bit, of a different approach to the content, you can use a key in your map to say, hey, look at this warehouse topic, look at warehouse topic A versus warehouse topic B for these things. And then if you use that topic in another map that uses warehouse, that uses content from warehouse topic B, you could say, okay, instead of looking in A, look in B. It makes it quite easy to swap things in and out. This way, with Conref, you have that direct line to say, always pull content from this file. But with the conkeyref, you have a little bit of freedom to say, always pull this type of content, but I get to choose the warehouse topic file that you are going to pull it from. So, with all of these things, I realize that, in our webinar is not the place to go into the nuts and bolts of exactly how to do these things. I could spend easily an hour just going over how conrefs and conkeyrefs are used. So, for more information on that, we do have a lot of information on learningdita.com. So just check out the courses there, particularly the reuse and the advanced reuse courses. You might also want to check out the publishing course that's there as well to get an idea for how the style sheets can help you. But if you're not currently authoring in DITA, here are things to think about before you start moving to DITA to take advantage of a lot of these reuse capabilities and these branding aids. So step one is, if you don't have them already, create templates and start using them. And make sure everyone is using them consistently. Sometimes that's not easy, but it's an important first step to get there. You want to make sure that you have a style for every type of thing you're going to manage, and you're going to want to remove all of the formatting overrides that are in these files as you start applying the templates. And let the template drive the formatting, not the author. And by doing that, I mean, you want to rely solely on that use of styles that are in that template. Avoid the urge to modify those, avoid the urge to create new ones, because then other documents are not going to have them. And if there's a template change for new branding, if you have a new style that you've introduced, it's not going to pick up those changes. It also makes for a very consistent user experience when you have everyone using the same formatting the same way for the same types of content. Your readers start to acknowledge what they're looking at, and they can kind of predict, okay, I'm looking for a how-to, so it's going to look this certain way. Consider using semantic style names instead of generic ones. So, using something like button text versus bold. Using something like, I don't know, running header, or using something like a subtitle rather than using a heading 2. And then make sure in your template you're addressing all of the layout requirements that you have. So if you have several different page designs, create them, especially in FrameMaker, you have those master page capabilities. Create those master pages for them. So that way you're taking all of that ad hoc formatting out of the equation and letting the templates drive as much of that look and feel as possible. And also, not just with your long documents, so like Word, FrameMaker, or anything else that you're using that requires a template. Things like PowerPoint, Keynote, all that stuff. A lot of times we see people starting to move that content over into DITA to manage as well. So make sure you're using templates for those as well. That you have these master slides, they're all set up, ready to use, no one's overriding them, the fonts are set, etc. And by doing this, you're really setting yourself up for a much easier conversion over to DITA. It facilitates a lot of the scripting that needs to happen, especially if you're using semantic styles in your templates. You can map those over to the semantic tags within DITA. It makes it quite easy. You can almost draw a one-to-one comparison at times. And you could start using the same conventions as well. And then when you do move over to DITA and you have to then define your style sheets, the specifications for those are really going to start writing themselves because they're all in the templates. All you need to do is document the template and you have your the beginnings or very close to the end of your specifications done. So you're standardizing your content. Unstructured authoring really doesn't allow the templates to impart structure. So you have to make sure that the styles are being used properly and consistently. Things to avoid, don't follow like a heading 1 with a heading 4 just because you think it looks better. If you have a very specific structure to follow, I really suggest you start using, if you're using headings 1 through 4, start with heading 1, and if you have a child topic, then make sure that's using heading 2. Also, don't try to apply multiple different styles to the same text. If you find that you're applying 3 different character formats to a single bit of text, then that really says, hey, we need a style for this in our template to accommodate this need, and make sure that need is real before you add it. Also, find smart ways of reusing your content. So write shorter topics that can be chained together and be mixed and remixed together. Use text insets again with FrameMaker where you need to reuse content rather than copying and pasting. Use cross references if necessary rather than duplicating content over and over and over again. If you write it in one place, if it's feasible to do it, especially with an HTML output, just link to the same thing again and have it be a separate page rather than repeating it. In general, avoid lots of fluffy prose. Write consistently, write concisely, and write directly, and limit yourself to talking about one thing per topic. And this will help you start moving your content over to DITA and get you in that DITA mindset for authoring. And finally, you want to make sure that you are removing all of these formatting overrides. I know I've mentioned it many times, but I can't stress it enough. These things can easily break an automated conversion to XML. If you're using a service or a tool to convert your Word styles or your FrameMaker styles over to DITA, any of these overrides that are going to be in your content either might be needed and will be ignored during the conversion process, or it will break the conversion process. So you want to be very careful about how those are being applied. If there's a need to format something a certain way, create a style for it, and include it in the template that everybody uses. And as you create all of these styles, give them meaningful names. Again, give them semantic names. Don't use bold, and really very bold for 3 different levels of bold. If you need to, call something. If you have a tagline that you're going to include, create a style called tagline. If you need to render button text or other UI element names in a very certain way, create something, a style called button text, or even better, if you're moving to DITA, call it UI control, and that way you can map UI control in your unstructured template over to UI control in DITA, and it's done. But having these specific, contextually and accurate style names will help you not only migrate to DITA easier, but it will help you identify any specialized content model needs as well. So if your content is starting to look like it's being structured in a certain way, or organized in a certain way, I should say, on the unstructured side, that will start being an indicator that, hey, we may not have a one-to-one match here in DITA, but in certain cases, so we might need to start modifying the DITA content model before we start putting content in here. It's a great indicator, and it prevents a lot of rework post-migration of content into DITA. It's easier to manage that up front than it is to discover it later. So I hope I kind of gave you an idea of how DITA can help you manage content that needs to be rebranded, and give you an idea of what it will take to get you from an unstructured approach to a structured approach. And at this time, I think I'll open it up to any questions that are out there.
Great, thank you, Bill. If you all have any questions, please be sure to drop those in the questions module so that we can get those answered. And I'll go ahead and start with this first one, Bill. How does editing within warehouse topics work when you have multiple people with access to content?
That's a good question, because it can easily be a traffic jam, or you could be updating things that don't apply to all areas where it's being used. It's really important to have some gateways in there. So if you have this collection of warehouse topics that everyone has access to, and everyone is copying, or not copying, but reusing content from those files, it's important to, one, make sure that anything that you are changing is going to be globally applicable. And if it's a case-by-case manner, then I would say hold off on updating anything within a warehouse topic until you've had a chance to discuss it with your team. Now, it's difficult to do this if you're using like a file system or a Git repository of some kind to manage your DITA content, but it gets easier if you're using a component content management system, because most of those systems, if not all of them these days, they have what's called where used reporting. So at any time you can go into a warehouse topic and you can select a piece of content that's in there, and you can say, hey, where is this content being used? And you can get a list of all the topics that reference it. At that point, you can do a quick survey of that information and of those uses, and say, okay, well, this will apply to every single one of them, so I'll go ahead and make the change. Or you can say, hey, this applies to 3/4 of these. I'm going to contact the writers for these other ones, see if if it does apply to their stuff, and if it doesn't, we'll work out exactly how to move forward with making a change to the warehouse topic.
Okay, great. So I have another question here. How do you key scopes work for filtering versus conkeyrefs?
How do the scopes work for keys versus conkeyrefs?
For filtering versus conkeyrefs.
So filtering metadata versus using conkeyrefs. A lot of times it really depends on what you are trying to do. In some cases, you want to just turn content on and off. So a conkeyref is basically, or even a conref, is going to assume that you are always pulling content into something. You're not pulling nothing in. There's always content to be pulled in. But in some cases, you're going to want to just flat out omit content for whatever reason. Again, that basic product versus deluxe product case, where you don't want to manage two different feature lists or parts lists. You just want to put all the parts in there for the deluxe and say, okay, I'm going to turn the deluxe only parts off, and then publish for the basic version. In that case, a conref or a conkeyref is not going to work because you are flat out omitting content at that point. And it's not that you're removing the content, you're just turning it off during publishing using filtering attributes or profiling attributes.
Okay, thank you. I have another one here. If you have never used templates before, how do you get your colleagues on board with using them consistently?
Whip and share, like taming lions. It can be difficult. It can be really difficult. A lot of times you just have to implement some kind of a peer review cycle for content. And this is really where it's important to have either peer reviews, or even better, have an editor, even if it's just a visual editor or a style leader, who sits there and says, you have to conform to the styles that are in this file. This contains overrides. Please fix it. You have to have that level of QA on your files going forward and keep pushing it back to the writers until they get that they can't move forward with their content until they adhere to the template. And if they make a very good case for why they have to do things differently, that's when you develop a new style, put it in the template, and allow them to use it. But at that point, it's no longer an override. It's a agreed upon style that's now managed in the template. That's really the only way to go about it. Some writers are really quick to pick it up and say, great, this makes my life easier. Other writers are always going to say, hey, you know what, I have a custom approach. I know, it works. It might be personal preference, but sometimes they may have a real need for formatting things a certain way. They need to learn to articulate that to your team and articulate that to the person managing the templates and say, this is a real need for formatting with this particular product line, with this particular subset of a company, what have you. And then, once you can get them to articulate that, then you can start adding things to the template and distributing that template out to all the team members again.
Great. Well, we're out of questions, so if anyone has any additional questions, if you would go ahead and drop them in the questions module now so we can get those answered. You can also send questions to experts@learningdata.com, and I'm going to drop that email address in the chat now. So feel free to email us those questions and we'll follow up with you. If you think of anything after the webinar, you can email those to us as well. I'm also going to drop the link to the evaluation survey in the chat box. So if you can just take a few minutes to fill that out, we would really appreciate the feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in there as well. All right, it looks like we are out of questions, Bill, so I believe that this concludes the webinar, so thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us for this Learning Data Live series presentation. Be sure to follow us at Learning Data and at Scriptorium on Twitter for updates on our next Learning Data Live series event. Thank you, everyone.